This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
If your fashion wish list lives rent-free in your brain, you need to be on Poshmark. With Poshmark, you're shopping millions of listings from thousands of closets, each curated by someone with their own style. Vintage finds, designer pieces, and everyday staples all in one place. Search for your favorites or let the discovery come to you. Poshmark makes it easy to find what you actually want to wear at prices that feel like a quiet win. Download the Poshmark app today and use code PODCAST10 when you sign up to get $10 off your first purchase.
Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast. It is a weekly chat about socially conscious topics impacting the culture. On this episode, we are joined by Sambaza, host and creator of the Sambaza podcast. Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Woke by Accident podcast, a weekly chat about socially conscious topics impacting the culture. We are excited to have our co-host, Sambaza, host and creator of the Sambaza podcast, originating from the Republic of Kenya. He has established himself as a distinguished figure in the podcasting community, and his work has been recognized with 3 nominations for Best African Diasporan Podcast by the APVA, and also a nomination for Best Blog by the Texas Creator Awards. Welcome, Sambaza.
Hey, Jen, welcome. Welcome.
Hey. Yes, good to see you. How's everything going?
Oh, everything is going. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas.
It is.
Oh, yeah.
It is.
Yeah, and we are officially on air.
We are looking forward to today's show. We do have a special guest for you guys, and thank you for joining us on a different day. I'm so excited about that. You had a quite eventful weekend. Why don't you share about that a little bit before we...
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I had to say this one. This past weekend, actually, for all you guys, I did run the I did run on the BMW Marathon series. So they have a series of events that happen. They have Friday, Saturday, and Sunday where you run. So I chose to run the weekend series. So I ran a 5K on Saturday and I ran a 10 half marathon on Sunday. My daughter ran the 2-miler. And if I'm not wrong, I think she was the first girl to have finished the 2-miler, because they started off with the high schoolers and then they went to the middle schoolers. She was probably first one, probably because I wasn't so sure. I didn't expect her to show up like that, but I did not see any other person before her. So I'll take it to the bank. She was the first girl to finish the 2-miler, and we had a great time with her.
Good. That is awesome.
One more thing is I am also have been offered a position for the FIFA volunteer for the upcoming World Cup that's going to be here. They're going to have like 9 matches in Dallas area, Arlington Stadium, and it's going to be like, wow. Look, I'm just giving you a little bit, but this thing is going to be awesome, and it's a great experience. I hope to be there, and God willing, inshallah, it's going to be awesome. And before we get into our other things, I just want to thank everyone who's on YouTube, TikTok. Welcome, guys, and Clubhouse. Hey, guys, thank you for showing up. And also Facebook. We're happy you're here. And yeah, that's all I'll say for now.
For sure. And so we'll do a pre-introduction of our topic before we introduce our guests formally. So we'll be diving into an important and nuanced conversation about the relationships between Africans and African Americans. Our topic will center around exploring whether there is harmony between the two groups who share a rich cultural heritage yet experience distinct social and historical realities. So we will touch on that, discuss opinions, challenges, misconceptions, and we have a special guest that will join us in that conversation. Do you have an affirmation for us?
Oh yeah, I have an affirmation. Now the affirmation for this week is, my friends do not judge me. And I repeat again, my friends do not judge me. That's the affirmation of the week for us today.
Okay, that's a little different, but we received that. We received that.
Awesome.
Let's get into it, and we will introduce our guest. So, our today's guest is a partner with Africa Hired LLC and co-host of the Better Informed Better Informed Immigrant and African Hired podcast. Through his work with African Hired, our guest is driving a powerful mission to tackle unemployment across the continent by connecting highly skilled African professionals with global opportunities. His commitment to creating pathways for talent and innovation reflect a bold vision. And we're really excited about that with the Better Informed Immigrant podcast. Our guest, who is on the podcast, provides a platform for voices that often go unheard and works to inform, educate, and connect communities. His unique perspective as an African immigrant enriches today's conversation about identity, belonging, and the dynamics between Africans and African Americans. And we are so happy to have him. So we welcome Mr. Kola Ladoja.
Oh, thank you very much. That introduction was wonderful. So thank you for saying all of those nice things. I think I would say like 50% is true, 50% is not true. And you made me look better than I really am. But thank you very much. And I have a question for Sambaza. Is this FIFA volunteer thing? Is this just an opportunity for you to go to the soccer games for free?
I do hope so. But, so it for a point it was, but one thing I would say is it creates a legacy. I'll still my kids will always say, oh, Grandpa volunteered for this, or my kids will say, our dad volunteered for this, and it'll be etched in history. Pictures will show. Now, with the digital age, there'll be lots of pictures. And if somebody's able to write a book, I think that volunteer for FIFA will be part and parcel of the book. So That's the reason why I did volunteer for it. It's more like a legacy and stuff like that, and fun too.
Okay.
Very nice.
Yeah. Jen, are you a soccer fan by any chance, Jen?
I am. Manchester United for life.
No, not you. She. Jen,
not so much. Not so much.
Okay. Not even women's soccer in the US?
I mean, I think it's prominent, but I'm just not that familiar with it.
ESPN Sundays, it shows. But Jen, it'll come slowly.
We actually have a soccer stadium here, so I might, try to get into it.
And when FIFA starts, that's the best time to start watching it, because that's when now you come and we'll go back and forth and talk about it. And then maybe on our shows you'll ask questions and I'll tell you. Of course, I'm a referee, so I'll give you some more info about what happens. Right. Now, Kola, the thing about this podcast is before you start, I always take to travel around Africa. Now I've taken a break since I'm here, and I'm just going to chill. But we do look for proverbs, and the proverb today is from Africa, and it says, no matter how big a child is, he cannot deny that he was once carried on the back of a woman. I don't know if you can relate to this, Jen, because the cultural differences. You all carry the child here, push. We put them in the back, and then we tie something in the back. But let's start again. Let me say the proverb. No matter how big the child is, he cannot deny that he was once carried on the back of a woman. All right. So what we do is we ask you how you think of that proverb and extrapolate it in your own words.
Oh, that's a difficult question. I'm still processing it a little bit. So I would say that my skill set is not necessarily philosophical arguments. I tend to say more practical things. But with that said, when I think about this particular proverb, I think about two different things. One is going to be, let us call it gender relations. So talking about, the critical role that women have played in our lives, all of us, and making sure that we are collectively making sure that their rights and privileges are preserved over time, right? So that's one set. The second one it kind of relates to what I would call parenting or my perception of parenting. So let me give you an example of what I mean. What I call it standing on the shoulder of giants, right? So every single generation, I think we stand on the shoulder of the generation before. And what happens is that when we are babies, right, kind of like we're standing on someone's shoulder, right? As a baby, well, maybe a human child is a little different, but your viewpoint will be less than the person that you're standing on's viewpoint. But as you grow, after a point in time, you're going to be taller because you're standing on their shoulder and you can see further, right? So sometimes you have this conflict between yourself and the generation before. You are seeing things in the future that they may not necessarily see, right? And we have this conflict and we think, our parents don't know or don't understand. When in reality, I think that perhaps what's going on here is because we're standing on their shoulder, we're able to see a little bit more. But sometimes, because we're able to see a little bit more, we don't have the experience that they've had to be able to see the ground that is nearby, right? So I think of that in that perspective as well, in the sense of, thinking about what our parents, in this case, the mother, their wisdom and how that applies to our lives. Because when you have that conflict of saying, I want to do my own thing, and she is providing high wisdom, you have that dynamic that you have to wrestle with. And I can give you a very good story that will illustrate that point, right? So my mom and I'm the only son of my mother. So I like to describe us as the same coin, but two sides. We care about the same things. We just always have the opposite point of view, right? She comes from a religious background. She's very religious. Everything is Bible, Bible, Bible. I tend to look at it more from a practical perspective. So that causes a lot of, let us call it, disagreements or tension when we're talking about ideas, right? Because the way she goes about is the opposite way that I would think about those things. So I had this opportunity. My friend was getting married. It was going to be a Nigerian wedding. It was in Atlanta. And my mom gave me some cash to put in my pocket. And I said, well, I don't need cash. I'm going to the wedding. Why do we need cash for, right? Granted, I've never really been, I think the only time I've been to a Nigerian wedding was when I was much younger. So I didn't really participate. This time I was a groomsman, one of the groomsmen. She kept on insisting, and I was so pissed off, like, I don't need this thing, I don't need this thing, I don't need this thing. But just to cut the long story short, I ended up taking the money. I was pissed off about it, but I ended up putting the money in my pocket. It was like this, number of bills. Turns out that during the ceremony, the host, which was a lady, would have all the groomsmen lie down, prostrate is what we call it in our culture. And you were not allowed to stand up unless you gave a gift, a cash gift, right? And so we were there. Some of the men were like me. They didn't bring any cash because nobody thought you were going to need cash in the wedding, right? It's a private ceremony. So let's just say that some people were lying down for like 15 minutes. I lied down too for a while. But because I had that cash, I was able to use it to be able to get out of that scenario and the event along. So what I'm trying to say here is that I have never experienced it before. To me, in the moment, it sounded, let us call it dumb. I don't want to call my mother dumb, but you know what I mean? It's like, why would I take cash in my pocket for an event that I'm going to, that I'm going to be indoors all day? I don't need any cash. I was fighting her about it, but she had the wisdom and the foresight to know, hey, you've never really experienced this before. And she didn't tell me what was going to happen, right? She just said, you have to carry this cash with you. So it goes back to what I was talking about, that analogy of saying, hey, I'm standing on her shoulder. Sometimes I can see things that are further away, but I miss the things that are nearby, right? Because she's had the experience to teach her those things and pass them on to me, hopefully. Sometimes, I'm a very rebellious child, so.
No, I love that. And I love that, like you said, she didn't share, because you'll learn. You'll find out.
Glad you agreed to take the money. Yeah, I think to follow on that is, as much as we, I think it's more with tradition. Don't forget where you come from.
There you go.
Which is where you go to. Remember where you come from. You may not like it. You may not. Be of that mindset. But whether you like it or not, you still started off from a back of a woman. They carried you from the back, which I must say my kids they did enjoy it. My wife even learned how to do that with my daughter and my son. My daughter loved it so much more. But yeah. So Kola, this topic that we're having today. Oh, Jen, I'm not. No, I keep forgetting Jen. Now, Jen, what about you? Or
Actually, you took it right from. I was going to say, don't forget where you come from.
okay.
Absolutely.
All right. Now back to you, Kola. From your experience and perspective, do you believe there's harmony between Africans and African Americans today?
And in what context are we talking about, right? So,
Now, I'll say, well, do we want to do with the culture when it comes to understanding the culture
Mhm.
of the way we do things?
mm,
Take for
um,
example, let me start off and give you this example. Um, the first time my son was born, but well, he can't be born any more times. But
how many sons do you have?
so when my son was born, when we brought him home, the culture is that the mom accepts the child at the doorstep, and it was kind of hard for my wife to figure that out. When she got to the house and my mom was ready to accept the child, but the child was in a seat in the baby chair, and I hadn't gotten the whole to explain to her. But at that point, she was like, "Wait, what's going on here?" But for a short while, it was like, "Oh, okay." Then I told her, "Hey, mom, this is how we do it at home. Mom accepts the baby because she's at the house, and then once she gets in, you get in with the baby, then you can take over, and everything goes on." So those are the kind of the things that I had experienced. Now, when the second one came in, now it was like, boom, this is what happens here. Take her and move. And then later on, she came in and said, "Okay, now I'm rested. I can take up the child." So those are some of the things that I'm talking about when it comes to a harmony between.
Mm.
Or a
So I,
bond.
What? But
Well,
yes.
or like a bond, or commonalities and things like that.
so I would say there are many opportunities for that. I would
Mhm.
say that. So I'm going to try to go with I guess two answers, right? So I would say initially, it would appear that there isn't much, right? I think one of the mistakes we make or we don't acknowledge is the fact that we have different experiences,
Mhm.
right? So let me flip that question back to you in a moment. If I said to you, is there commonality in the culture between an African and um, someone from the Orient or a Caucasian? Yeah, you would say maybe not as much, right? But I think because we look the same complexion wise, we tend to make the mistake that there is commonality
Mhm.
at the very beginning. Now, what I'm
Mhm.
trying to clarify here is not that the cultures are radically different. There is some overlap between the cultures. It's just that there is also a lot of differences that are not necessarily acknowledged until tension or conflict happens, right? So, to answer your question in a more brief way, I would say that there are a lot of opportunities for harmony, but I would say in the beginning of that relationship, I would say that that doesn't exist. And I
Mm.
think one of the things that we could do collectively would be to acknowledge those differences, and then come together knowing those differences so that we can um, better better consolidate or better enjoy our commonality, because there's more about us that is the same than there is that is different.
But how do we start that conversation to where we are able to now bring in let's say people who are of the same, I don't want to say mindset, but of the same curiosity as us, because not
Mhm.
everyone is curious to learn what is the next door neighbor's whatever religion, whatever language, tribe, whatever it is. So you're looking at who can be part of that buy-in to be able to accept that. How do we get them to there? And we have a group called I'm going to throw this, the African Think Tank, which allows everyone, and brings everyone who's in the space of wanting to know what happens in Africa. That's why it's called the African think tank. And their purpose is to educate, enhance, and be a beacon of success for both the African community and the African community and the greater community out there. It does not specify which community it is, but if you are wanting to be part of the African think tank, you just come in and sit together, we break bread together and share ideas. And I think that's where we can learn. That's one of the ways to look at it. But they are more like, to me, I'd say more professionally, but they do have that other aspect where when you meet, you're more on the professional level.
Mm-hmm.
Now, what about the social level? Because there's a different level when you talk about social level, like these family gatherings. When you go out when you meet people on dates, when you kind of meet people at work. Those are the ones maybe I want to ask about. How do you get the buy-in with them?
Mm. So I don't know. I think that sometimes the way that I would suggest is maybe we talk about the things. So let me give an example of what I mean. Because I've not really said anything yet, but let's talk about a more common scenario, right? An African immigrant comes maybe here to the US. We are all in the US, right? He or she is coming here for multiple reasons, but one of that is a hope for a better life. Right. I hate to say it, when I'm hoping for a better life, I'm not necessarily in the best place to start having a conversation about cultural differences. Right. And it's not that it's not important. It is just that my priorities are more on basic needs compared to some of those other things.
But are you open to connecting with someone that may be from a different walk of life? African Americans that, are not immigrants, obviously. Are you open to, like you said, you're not necessarily here to talk about the differences, but are you open to welcoming friendships? You're starting a new job, you're coming into a new situation.
Yes, right. So I think he or she or the individual is open to all of those things. It is just not the main priority. And I think where I think there is a lot of opportunity here is having that understanding. I would say in this case, the onus would be for the people that are here already, that understand the landscape here, to provide that helping hand, right? Usually, what I mean by that helping hand could be, you know what, you just moved into the neighborhood. Let me come over and introduce myself. Let me tell you a little bit about what I do. Learn a little bit about you, connect you with resources that you may not be aware of, or connect you with some sense of community, right? And I would say that initial burden I would put on, whether fairly or unfairly, I would put on the people that are currently here. So that may be African immigrants that are already here. It may be African American brothers and sisters that are already here, to say, hey, we are welcoming you into our community, right? Because you have to understand, just like if I took somebody from here and I dropped them somewhere in Africa, for example, right, they would need a similar level of support, right? And I would say in that case, the onus or the burden should be on the people that are there, that may be aware of the community or things to watch out for, to kind of put out that olive branch, the first one at least. So I would say, and the reality of the situation is that sometimes you don't know what you don't know, right? So we just take an average. A lot of Africans have been exposed to, whether it is media, but whether it is in their day-to-day lives in their countries in Africa, they've been exposed to people from other countries. But a lot of them may not have been, right? Just like if I went to China, for example, there are probably a lot of people in China who may not have had an experience with a Black person before, right? All they know is what they saw in Hollywood or whatnot, right? So, when that person behaves a certain way, we should look at it from the perspective of, hey, this is somebody that is, let us call it, not yet informed, right? Because all they know is a caricature that's been put out there by some TV show they saw or one experience they had, right? Somebody who goes to Africa, for example, maybe they were having a terrible time and that was the time they interacted with that individual, and that person has a perception that everybody's like this.
Mhm.
So I guess to get back to your main point is there is a lot of opportunities for that. I just think that sometimes we need to meet people where they are and then take them to that place rather than trying to do that in the very beginning, right? If somebody's worried about making stuff up here, but if I'm worried about feeding my wife and my kids, I have 3 kids at home, my wife, my skill set from Africa or my degrees from Africa don't necessarily translate over here. So I'm having to start over from the beginning to go work 2 or 3 shifts as a security guard to feed them for a day. That is not necessarily the time that I want to have a conversation with you about philosophical differences between African American community and Africans, right? I'm more focused on those basic needs. Now, if you come to me, regardless of your race, and you provide a solution or a pathway that could be helpful, then I have an opportunity to actually start that dialogue and having those conversations, because that dialogue is needed, right? Because the reality of the situation is that a lot of Africans' perception of African Americans, when they've not been exposed to them, is flawed, right?
Yes.
Just like it is vice versa, right? African American perceptions of Africans, when they've not been exposed to them, is also flawed, right? So it's both sides. So that dialogue needs to exist. I just think that sometimes it's a lot easier for it to happen for other, let's call it groups, because you can see that physical difference, right? When I go into Chinatown, I don't expect it to be smooth, quote unquote. But when I go into an African American community, they all look like me. I came from an African community where they all look like me. I expect some level of smoothness to happen, and when it doesn't happen, I feel as if I'm being, let us call it, shunned or whatever, which is not necessarily the case. It's just that I took for granted that thing that I did not take for granted in that Chinese community in this case.
So here's what I want to ask. So you kind of were talking in like hypotheticals, right? So Sambaza, you can chime in here too, since you're both immigrants and, had that experience. I think you said you came over in your 20s. I'm not sure when you came to the States, Kola, but, share in your personal experience, any, maybe positive or challenging moment where you didn't feel the love, that's what I'm curious of.
Yeah,
or maybe you did feel the love.
So I wouldn't say that I didn't feel the love. I would just say that I always found it easier growing up. So let me give you some context. I was born in Connecticut. I went to, my family migrated back to Nigeria when I was 5.
Okay.
And I came back in 2001, right? So when I came back and I went to community college, right? I was in a city in Connecticut, not necessarily the best city. It's not a bad city. It's just that, there's also, when you look at it for socioeconomic class, right, it's kind of what you call an inner city kind of thing. So I would say that for me, the experience, I was able to relate to my fellow Africans a lot easier. I felt like was able to relate to Caucasians easier, to my Oriental brothers and sisters easier than I could my African American brothers and sisters, right? And the reason why wasn't because they were doing something. It was just because I didn't acknowledge the fact that we were different enough, right? I went into that relationship thinking the same, and when it was different, I felt some kind of way about it, right? So because of that, it kind of made me feel some kind of way. But when I didn't necessarily have those assumptions when I was dealing with some of the other races that I talked about, or some of those groups that I talked about. So it wasn't that there was anything wrong with what they were doing or what I was doing. It's just that my natural, the way that I related to my African American brothers and sisters was the same way I would relate to my African brothers and sisters. Well, because we had shared context, our African brothers and sisters would get it, but my African American brothers and sisters would not get it, right? And it felt awkward. Let's call it awkward, corny, whatever word you want to use. And it didn't necessarily flow. And you have to kind of understand that and kind of walk through that process. It's kind of like if you're meeting somebody for the first time, right? It's normal for first date, for example, to be a little awkward until it warms up, and then you get past that.
Okay.
Well, for me, I'll give this scenario where my friend invited me for a party, and she was African American, and I had gone to this party. So I don't know why she did this, but she was not there at that particular time. She was supposed to be there, but she was somewhere. She told me, "Okay, when you finish work, just show up." So I get to this place, and it's a regular house, nice house. Saturday, I think about maybe 10. No, I finished work at about 10, 11 o'clock there. So I get into this house. Nobody knows me. It's a party. She told me just go there, and when you get there, just say I'm Didi's friend. She's coming and whatever. So I got in there, I get invited, get in, sit in, and I was watching TV. One of the guests at the place, well, she was like, "Hey, how are you doing? You know, blah blah blah." She was talking to me, and like, "Is there anything you want to do? You want to play dominoes or cards?" I was like, "Oh, okay, sure." And for me, that was, I think, it was maybe my third month in the U.S., and I was not so, just getting out there was just hard. So I go to the back door. I open this door, and all the men were at the back now. They were playing cards. And I remember they were just sitting down playing cards. Everybody was playing cards. So I was like, well, nah, it was way too many. And they looked at me like, oh, okay. So they did not know me. So it was like, hey, brother. And I didn't stay. So it was like, oh, maybe this guy just came in, checked out, was looking for somebody, went back in. So I got into the house and was sitting watching TV. The lady comes and asks me, do you want to watch TV? I'm like, no. Do you want to go play? I'm like, nah. I'm waiting for Didi. She's coming. Then suddenly I did not know how people play dominoes. Somebody slapped the dominoes table. Bam! And it was all the ruckus out there like, ah! Now, I'm from Africa. Look, I'm far away from home. I don't understand what's going on.
What city was this?
Pop up. It was in Arlington here in Dallas.
Oh, God.
I knew something was about to pop off. So what did I do? I walked out of the house, went and got into the car and drove back home. I think an hour later, Didi's calling me. She's like, hey, where are you? I'm like, no, I'm at home. What happened? I'm like, look, I have to work. I had to work the next day. Well, a couple months later, that's when I went to explain to her, and I told her, hey, you know what? I had no idea that's how people play dominoes. But when somebody slapped that dominoes card, I was like, look, I'm in Africa. I came here to work. If something ever happened to me here, what would my mother say? I mean, I was supposed to be at home, not, So
wait. How is that to feel the love or
it's how I perceived. It was an innocent thing that happened, but the way I perceived it is like something was about to happen. I was not supposed to.
You didn't feel safe.
And then when I told Didi about that, she laughed and she was like, "You're crazy." I'm like, "Well, you know what? Something I learned today." So those are the things that my perception had to change when I realized that, oh, you know what? This is just something that happens. That's normal. But at that point, I didn't get it. So those are one of the things that the harmony. But I can tell somebody now that, hey, you know what? If you go and people are playing dominoes, or I'll tell them in advance, if people are playing dominoes, when they slap the domino table, it gets rowdy. So understand that.
But okay, you're kind of missing the point of like not feeling the love around Black folks. Like you didn't feel like, oh, let me leave because it's too many. Like that was the cultural, kind of reference that you mentioned there. But
well, the love or the fact that when they saw me, nobody came in and say, "Hey, partner, hey, you want to come play some dominoes?" No, I didn't get that. They looked like, "Oh, okay, fine." Like the game was going on, so it would still happen the same way. Here's what I say: it'll still happen the same way if it was in an African context. If an African American brother walked into a place and they have the same thing happen, we would just look at you. If you were barbecuing, we'll look at you and be like, "Hey, what's up? Hey." Somebody will kind of tell you, "Hey, come on in. You wanna come join us or something?" There'll be that one person. Other people will be like, "Oh, oh well, this is so and so's friend." Blah blah blah. That's in an African context. Now, I always live by this rule, and I always tell people, if you're going to meet anywhere in this world, if you're going to meet your in-laws, you're going to meet, and this is going by the same topic that you say, you're not going to be shown love, hostile. I mean, okay, uh, my wife will be like, okay, but each time I went to like visit, like say, let's say an African American girl invited me to their place, right? You know, they'll be like, this person is coming in, and they're like, oh, who's this guy? Who are you? You know, everybody's looking at her, who's that guy? You know, because first you show up at the door, she's like, oh, somebody's coming. So everybody will be watching you with that, with those looks of like, okay, you know, some may not like you, some may like you, may not show it, but there's always that one guy, that crazy uncle, crazy aunt, or somebody will be like, hey man, come over here. You need a plate, you need something, you know what you need. You need some water, you need a beer. You know, there's always that one person that'll always get you in and make you feel comfortable.
But it's not like singling you out, like, hey, you talk funny. Where are you from? Or, you know, like that kind of thing.
Somebody will ask you that. There'll be somebody who asks you that.
Oh, see, that's what I want. That's, you know, I came up with this idea. You know, someone like making you feel, you know, different, uncomfortable. You know, getting ranked on at the barbershop. You know, anything like that.
So,
Kola.
For you, let me put it like this. Back in the day, yes.
Okay.
But now with TikTok, all this social media coming around, I think there has been an explosion of knowledge that it is really hard. It is really hard for you to go, and maybe with my age, it's really hard for me to go somewhere and somebody starts clowning about Africa. I know how to act, and I'll look at you, I'll be like, okay, where do I want to interact with you? Do I want to interact with you in an intellectual level? Do I want to interact with you in a funny level, or where are we at? Am I going to educate you? Am I just going to keep your ignorance with you? You know, if you're being ignorant, you know. So I kind of have to match the person. When I was at those times, yeah, they'd be like, yeah, and I'll tell you this: in New Orleans, they're rough. Yeah,
Okay, Kola.
So I would say that I don't know that anybody's been I don't know if I can think of a scenario where somebody is being intentionally trying to make me feel uncomfortable. I don't think that exists, right? I don't think that you know, people ask questions because they don't know, right? So for example, somebody may ask a question, the race is irrelevant, but somebody could ask the question of like, do you guys dance with monkeys? Or right before TikTok and stuff like that, right? The reality of the situation is that people don't know, they didn't know about any country in Africa, right? Some people knew, but a lot of people didn't know, right? They've never spoken to somebody from that part of the world before. They've seen, for lack of a better word, Lion King. They know it was based in Sopolis in Africa, right? So they make assumptions and they ask the question. And I don't think we can fault them for asking the question. I think that's fair. I think what we don't want is somebody who is asking the question for malicious intent. And I don't think a lot of people are doing that, right?
Kola, no, you know it. I think, Kola, you are intelligent enough to know when somebody is making fun of you and is trying to make fun of you in a way that's derogatory, even though you might want to be like, yeah, you know, like, is it really? Is it really? And then you'd be like, well, okay,
I would say that most people. So don't get me wrong, we all like to have fun and jokes, and you know, a good joke is slightly, there is a slight edge of being personal in a good joke, right? So I think a good joke, a good ribbon, we are all guilty of that. I cannot deny, right? And you know, sometimes you talk about scenarios like that. But I would say what I'm talking about is somebody who, for lack of a better word, remember the days when people used to say things like African booty scratcher, right? That was before my time. In that scenario, maybe it wasn't necessarily a good ribbon. It was just to be malicious, right? So I think in my time, I did not feel like people were being malicious, right? I think people were asking questions because they didn't know any better. They may have seen something they thought was interesting and they wanted to kind of talk about it or whatnot. So those kind of things. The barbershop is a common example of that, right? So let me give you an example. This didn't happen to me, but it's, you know, my good friend was telling me about it. He and his brother, he was in the barbershop getting a haircut. And in the barbershop, they were talking about this scenario about how Africans come in and In Nigeria, I'm going to use Nigeria specifically. When we go to the barber shop, we're not well dressed, right? You're going there to go get your hair. You're wearing flip flops. You're walking in. You may be dusty because you went to go play soccer or whatever. You walk into the barber shop, get your haircut, then you go home and take a shower and do all those kind of things to get properly prepared. In the US, my experience has been that people go into the barber shop like already like dressed, and they're going there to kind of put the finishing touches. Think of it as our ladies wearing their makeup, right? So it's a different scenario. So a lot of Africans come here, or Nigerians will come here, and we don't know any better. We use the Nigerian system, right? We go play soccer, we go do the stuff, and then we walk into the barber shop with flip flops on, dusty feet, and whatnot to get the haircut, which is different for what our African American brothers
not dusty.
do. Ashy. Right. It's not dusty in this case. It's ashy, right? Because we're not the same kind of the same scenario. But so he was getting his haircut, and in the barbershop they were talking about that. They were talking about that story about how Africans come in, and sometimes they come in with flip flops to the barbershop. They come and get their haircut. They're ashy or they're dusty or whatever it is, and then 3-4 months later, you find out the person is now driving a brand new car and has a house. And it was good reading in the sense of they were talking about that transition between that African way of doing things to being familiar and more aware of the American way of doing things. But they were also talking about how these people come in and make a way for themselves, right? And that industrial and work ethic. They were also talking about it. But fun and games, jokes, and the barbershop. It's like there's a good jabbing here and there. Right. So as they were talking about that scenario, he was already on the set. He was getting his haircut. His brother walks in. And his brother walks in, matching the story that we just talked about. Flip-flops on, ashy feet. And everybody, as he walks into the barbershop, everybody looks at him and just bursts out laughing. Right? Even my friend, who is the brother of this guy, just started laughing. So his brother who walked in, walked into the place, everybody walked laughing. He just walked out, right, and left. Because, you walk into the scenario, everybody looks at you and then starts laughing. You don't know what's going on.
Oh, gosh.
And I think later on, he and his brother spoke, right? So that was what I mean by good reading, right? It was good-natured fun. They were talking about, the difference in culture between the African way of doing things and the African-American way of doing things when it comes to the barbershop. But they were also talking about things like, hey, the work ethic or something positive about this community that they felt and whatnot. So, there's definitely some good reading on both sides.
Okay. And you know what? I want to reframe. I just got a message from somebody saying, like, what is the topic? So, to reframe, we have Kola, who is a podcaster and business owner, joining us as we dive into the important and nuanced conversation about the relationship between Africans and African Americans. So we're asking the question, is there harmony between these two groups who share a rich cultural heritage, yet experience distinct social historical realities? And so we're talking about opinions and challenges, misconceptions, and opportunities for greater unity. So that is our topic, and I know we're sharing this on other platforms, so just kind of a reframe there of our topic.
Now, Jen, now we're going to ask you, what has been your experience?
Yeah, I mean, and I think I have a question in here about like misconceptions, you know what I mean? Or maybe preconceived notions that, and I can just think about, like you said, the little name calling that, kids, you're African, blah, 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 you talk funny, just, they may come in with the cloth and and kids just don't know any better and they say something odd. But you notice as you get older, sometimes those little odd comments continue and people just kind of form, oh, well, he's from Africa. So, there's these opinions and misconceptions. And so I just want to dig into that. And like, why can't we, come together, break bread, and be in the same organizations, ladies from Africa in my sorority, and we're all sisters and sorors, you know what I mean? And so I just want to pick your brain on that, since you have immigrants in the circle of friends. And so
so what's yours been?
I, acknowledge that there are cultural and, differences, but I think like you shared here that it kind of depends on, what your immigrant story is, on if you're more open to making friends with other people from other, or are you more, I'm just going to stick with my little African crew and that's it. You know what I mean? And, no new friends. I'm just going to stick with my, or are you kind of a, open, I'm gonna be friends with everybody. And I'm kind of like that. Like I literally, like some of my reseller friends will say, like, you made friends with, the blue-eyed, blonde-haired guy and this older lady over here. And just some people are just open like that and they'll just be friends with anybody. They'll just talk to anybody and just walk right up. But I know that there's some cultural things where, like even some of our non-melanated friends who are open and, don't make you feel bad. They may say, my grandparents, they're, like I have a coworker, he says like, I can't sit at another Thanksgiving dinner with my racist grandpa. You know what I mean? And like, as
So, but
not.
Jen, here's where
Yes.
here's one.
Yes.
All right, now you've expressed yourself. Now all of us gave an example of a story that we have had. Now that's what I was boiling down to, an encounter that you've had with somebody from the continent of Africa.
Right.
That you may have thought, okay, now we have a cultural difference, that you have realized that, oh well, hey, there's a misconception that I've had that, like, okay, what did you have? No, now what's your experience?
Like I was sharing, I don't take the sugar daddy out your ear, my African brother, that I am open to everyone in diversity. And I even have ladies from Africa and who I call sister and soror in my sorority. You know what I mean? And I don't put people in a box. I'm open to being friends with everybody. You know what I mean? I think it's awesome that someone has that rich cultural nature. Oh my God, a couple of jobs ago, one of my really good coworker friends was from Philippines. And, she actually moved back to the Philippines and had a going away party. And, I cried my little eyes out, because she was just the homie like that, So some people you just connect with, it don't matter where they from. If they have a good heart, if they just open, they want to be your friend. They're, and I personally, I wasn't raised to treat people differently from where they're from, whether you black, white. I just, you treat people with kindness and respect. You know what? Stop it. Okay, Sambaza, why don't we greet the chat?
Oh, okay. On the side, we got Ed Campbell. He says, we have so much in common despite the language and cultural barriers. Yes, you're right.
That is completely true.
And he says, we have been taught, even tricked to dislike and see each other in a very dim light. It's deep and psychologically sad. It's a vital. He says, conversation, I'm glad you're having it. Many are afraid to address. True. It's a topic, interesting topic.
Yeah, thank you, Brother Ed.
Could I just add a little thing to what Ed Campbell was saying, right? So I think, so I hear what you were saying, Jen, but as far as you being open and welcoming to diversity, and that's great. But what I would say is, what about your first experience to diversity, right? Because we like to talk about like Africa and the African American community, but the reality of the situation is that whenever you have groups of human beings together, we always find ways to organize them in groups, right? This same thing that we're talking about here, when we're on the continent, different African people treat each other differently. Right. So the same challenge that we're talking about here also exists on the continent. I think what happens is that we move from Africa to the US as an example, right? And your community has to be bigger by default because you don't necessarily have your quote unquote tribe in the US like you did over there. And you get that for some people that could be their first exposure to diversity, and that may be by necessity, right?
Mhm.
So what I'm trying to say is that I agree that we collectively should do better. I agree that there is more to that unifies us than is different. But I also think we should acknowledge the fact that this is a human thing to do. And the only way that we actually address it is by grace on all sides.
Mhm. So definitely, and that made me think about how we connected with Kola. Sambaza, you want to share about that?
Yes, we met Kola over at the Afrozen Audio Festival, and this had been happening before then. We had been meeting in a group
Mhm.
that was, of African podcasters. So it was just a way of us meeting each other at the same place, which is the Afrozen Audio. And it so happened that Kola had to step in and be the guy because one of the panelists was missing, and just like that, he offered, and he was amazing on that panel. You can go and check it out. Shout outs to the Afropolitan podcasters for doing an amazing follow up to what we had done the previous year. At Afrozen.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We should have mentioned that in the introduction that Kola here was a featured presenter at the 2025, what was that, 7th and final Afro's Audio Podcast Festival.
Yeah. Yep. Now, I have a question. Now, because we've talked
Before
about
you
all these
actually
experiences.
ask your question, let me just say all the credit goes to Zen, our friend Zen. She was the one that invited me to this. I
Okay.
wouldn't have gone to that festival if she didn't. So
Oh
all
my
credit goes
gosh.
to Zen. She makes me look better than I really am.
Shout out to Zenith.
Zenith Hamamba Malawo, who is Assorted Immigrant Stories. That's her podcast. And so, what moving into this, after we talked about misconceptions and gave examples of how each one of us has had an encounter with our media and storytelling, such as podcasters. Do they help in bringing forth our differences and to a place of harmony where, well, it could either be harmony or it could be a space where we will engage and disagree on pointers and maybe probably find a medium ground? Do these mediums help? Podcasts, radio programs, or
Television.
television or social media?
Mm. So I think they can help. They can help. I think we have to acknowledge the fact that media is not perfect, right? What grabs attention is usually things that we would not be proud of normally, right? So the reality of the situation is that some of the challenges that we're talking about today probably were emphasized by media, right? So let's talk about before social media became a thing, right? And I am not a media connoisseur. This is not my skill set. This is not my stuff. But I could, I saw, like anybody else, when I was going to come back to the US, I watched movies, right? I always watch movies. That's what I enjoyed. But even when I knew I was going to be coming back for my studies, I wanted to make sure that I was familiar enough with the American accent so that I could pick up what people were saying. So I kind of increased my movie watching, right? And those were the days of Rambo's, Commando, Sylvester Stallone, and whatnot. And it was not the days of like Sidney Poitier was before my time, right? I wasn't introduced to Sidney Poitier when I was in Africa. My point I'm trying to make here is that in some of the shows that I could remember, and not that I can remember them all, when you see Black characters, right, they were not necessarily positive characters, right? Or there were certain things that were not necessarily great. So let me give an example of what I mean. In Nigeria, growing up, things like smoking was considered to be a negative, right? It was, right, whether it was right or wrong, that was kind of how it was. things like drugs and stuff is considered to be quite a negative, right? And when people watch movies and shows which are not reality, and they see people of color doing those things, that have been the ones marketing it and selling it, and that's their whole experience with these individuals. Whether it is intentional or not, you start to tell yourself a story that is not necessarily true, right? That in this case, our African American brothers and sisters are only interested in drugs, right, or only interested in this, and that is not true, right? In this same TV shows, you don't see as many, and this is not to put fault on anybody, but you don't see as many representations of group of other people of other groups or races doing those same things, right? So yeah, it's normal if my grandparents, for example, who may have only been exposed to that, to think that that's what people do, right? They don't know any difference. Just like if you've only seen movies of Africa and it's always Tarzan. Imagine it was Tarzan. Tarzan was a black person, and you would think people really jumping with lions and tigers, and you know what I mean. It's you don't know any better, right? So I think they could help. I think social media helps in the sense that the reality of the situation is that I think social media presents an alternative, right? People are interested in different things that catch people's attention that are not necessarily tied to some of these habits that may not necessarily be the greatest. It could be dancing, for example. It could be music. It could be other things. So I think those things are helpful. I also think there's also, let's call it, other types of media out there that represents some of the positives in our community collectively that exists. I do think we need to do a better job of promoting that types of media. Right. And I think conversations like this help. So in my opinion, I think what you guys are doing is absolutely fantastic. I think we need to do things like this more. I want to see, I'm trying to also do something like this where we have representation from all parts, right? So the one I'm currently working on is called Africa Happy Hour. Basically, the thought process there was to have representation from all parts of Africa, including the diaspora, right? That would be our Caribbean brothers and sisters. That would be our African American brothers and sisters. That would be people on the different parts of the continent. And then just talking about issues, right? Talking about our different perspectives in a respectful way.
Right.
And we understand that we are not necessarily always going to get consensus, but we can at least make sure we hear different people's points of view, because that educates us collectively about where people are coming from. So I think media could be really helpful, but I think we need to be intentional about how we're using that media to actually promote that.
For sure. And I think that's good for you to share about your podcast. You mentioned that you're working on this African Happy Hour. That sounds amazing. But tell us about your podcast too, where you have these kind of conversations as well.
Yeah, so my current podcast, I have two of them. One of them is called the Better Informed Immigrant, and the other one is called Africa Hired. So they tend to be more Africa focused, or the African community focused. Not that our African American brothers and sisters are not welcome. It's just that when you're talking about immigration stories of Africans, some of our African American brothers and sisters may be interested in hearing what people went through or were thinking about as they made that journey across. But may not necessarily have any personal experience in that area, because it was their great grandfather or their ancestor that made that journey on their behalf. So that's one thing. And then the second thing was really going to be Africa Hired was really trying to help our African brothers and sisters connect with opportunities here or across the globe, right? And I think it goes back to what we were talking about before. I think the path forward for us collectively is collaboration, right? So how do we kind of collaborate? Sometimes that's a little bit difficult because of some of these challenges that we're talking about, those cultural nuances and differences. So trying to see if we can bridge that gap of explaining some of those cultural nuances to folks so that they can better collaborate on other things.
So for me, I'll add in this, right? I appreciate your input on the show and everything. But when you talked about your experience watching the movies, my experience was different when I was getting to come across here to the US, I watched African American movies, and I think I've said this before. And the difference is they have that angry black woman syndrome or scenarios that were being shown all over. So what you see is not what is there. So don't believe what you see. That's what I've learned from that.
Mm-hmm.
I think I watched an incident in it was a Mardi Gras scene on CNN before I got here, and there was a guy on horseback, and there was this older gentleman who was being hit by the cops. I mean, it was bad, and I looked at it and I was like, I'm never gonna go to New Orleans and go to Mardi Gras. Why? Because it looks like there's something that's going to be going on or happening over there. So that's not what I would want to do. By it doing that, by me seeing that scenario, I didn't realize that I would end up going to Mardi Gras and enjoying Mardi Gras for the longest, and even my kids would have origins from there. I'd get married from there. Another thing was a drive-by shooting. I watched Boys in the Hood. What was I seeing? People being shot by drive-bys. And what was the classic, the Impala, that classic Impala. Well, I'm at a gas station in the middle of the night. This guy innocently comes in, parks his Impala, Chevy Impala, outside. And I think it was also, remember that time when there was that guy who was killing people in the DC area, that Malvo, that DC murder guy was the sniper, DC sniper. And this guy walked into the store calmly. He was just driving his car, came in to pick up something. Do you know, I was so scared. I thought that was the end of my life. And the perception was that what I had seen in the movies is what is going to happen to me right now. Chevy, the guy just came and bought his stuff. I actually told him to leave the store and not even pay for it. I said, you know what? And then 5 minutes later, when I cooled down, I realized, you know what? This guy had nothing to do with it. All he did was just drive a car, and he just came into the store to buy some items, and that's his stuff. So these are a few of the things that I want to say that have affected me, to where I have now learned to acknowledge people and say, you know what, it's not as you believe it is. And that's part of the Sambaza podcast. If you look at my series and some of the conversations that we've had, we always look at that aspect that we are all equal. Even like Ed Campbell says, no matter what we have, we may have different languages or cultural barriers, but there's a baseline to what we all have. We're human beings and we act a certain way. Jen the other day said, is it last week when we had the show? And I was trying to tell you that Africa, when we get food, when food is being passed on in a meal, like when you have a gathering, who eats first? Is it the older people or the younger people? And I thought in the African American community, it was more the younger kids get fed first, but I came to find out that it was the same as the Africans. So the older people eat first, and then the younger kids eat later. That baffled me. So these are the things that we see as social differences that we come to understand each other by collaborations and hanging out together and having these conversations. Some might be hard, some might be easy. But all in all, what I'll say, and I think after this, Jen, you'll take us home, is that I think this is a beginning to having these conversations to what can be a marvelous time as people getting together and having these tough conversations. So with that, Jen, take us home.
For sure. And I want to offer Kola any last words as our guest.
So actually, I feel that I don't know that I have any last words, but I would like to ask a question, because I think we kind of talked a little bit about some of the differences, but we didn't necessarily address opportunities for collaboration and getting beyond those differences. So I guess I'll pass it on to the both of you about what do you guys think are some ways that we could, bridge beyond the divide. There is not much of a divide, but it is there. So how can we kind of address that and get that over with, if we want to call it that way?
Jen, you want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, just, like Michael Jackson says, start with the man in the mirror. You know what I mean? Start with yourself and be open when you are introduced to a new group of people, whether you're starting a new job or an organization that you're a part of. Be open to, someone that may be from another country or a different, community that you're in, and not, don't lead with those preconceived notions. I didn't get a chance to share about the media, which media is everything to me because I'm such a pop culture junkie. But I feel like the media's perception of or portrayal of Africans or people who are supposed to be from Africa is trash and horrible. You know what I mean? Like, I can just think about 3 negative stereotypes in my head right now, which, we won't go there. And I think I even asked you guys' opinion when we were having dinner in Baltimore about one, television show character that's supposed to, be this immigrant, in this relationship with an American. And it just, I
Bob
just
Hart
seen.
Abishola. What did you say? Bob Hart Abishola.
Yeah,
Yes.
Bob loves Abra show. Yeah. And so I just, we don't have to go on and on, but I just feel like, some of the stereotypes are really amped up. Like, I'm even thinking like barbershop, the African guy in the barbershop, Dinka, like that character was ridiculous. You know what I mean, it's I don't know.
I'm
Come
not
on.
sure I know that character. Which one? The barbershop one? Oh, the barbershop
Yeah.
movie. I've not seen it. I'm not
And
really
then
seen
that
Barbershop.
guy wasn't even African, was he? Because I've seen him on something else and he didn't have the accent, or I don't know. Maybe he was African and he was just playing up the accent. Because I know some people do that who are actors.
But you know what? He got the cute chick at the end.
Did
Yeah. You didn't see
Oh,
it. You need to go watch the movie.
That's what you remember. I'm thinking
You
about this
asked me about,
horrible.
you said it was
You
horrible.
weren't
Yeah,
offended?
no, they see, the thing is, they made fun of him not knowing that he had another life. The way he spoke so nicely to the women. Remember, even the other
Okay.
guy, the light skinned guy, would tell them, "Hey, stay off my friend."
Yeah,
Remember
yeah.
the guy who has a buy-in. He was the guy. I forget his name, but the light skinned guy. He was the one who was always, on the African side, because he knew that people were always on him and made fun of him, but they didn't realize that he had another life. But remember, at one point they found out he had, yeah. Yeah, so there's always that one guy who's always be next to you. I remember. Okay, I'm gonna go to this story before I go to my last part about how we can bridge that. I was listening to a show. It's 97.9, no, K104, and they were talking about this African experience of theirs. And this guy actually said it on the show, that when they were in high school, they would berate and make so much fun of this African guy, and the mom was mad about it. They were kind of mad about how they treated the son, and I don't think you can do this now. So what they did was, this boy came and told the kids, "Hey, my mom asked you guys to visit me," or he invited those kids to his house to see what his house is like. And this guy said when they got to the house and they got in, they weren't being given a meal or anything. They just went to see the house and see how they lived. They got in, see how their house is, what they watched, and everything that was around there. And then their mom said, "Hello, how are you doing? How are you boys doing? How's school? Everything is okay? You all doing okay?" Didn't even reprimand them for anything else. But till today, that guy said that was one of the most eye-opening experiences that he's ever had. And from that day on, he stopped making fun of that boy, because that's when he realized that, I'm making fun of this guy. I don't know who he is. I don't know where he's from. But now that I've been to his house, I've been able to see how he lives. And probably he just lives like I do. I mean, Jen, we don't put, I'm going to make fun. We don't put, cellophane on the sofas, but that's how your grandmamas used to do. But, we don't. But you get my point. We had different, ours was different. We had those cloths. Remember, you remember, I think, yeah, we put cloth. We never did the other part.
Okay.
You have a sofa. The sofa would have all type of decorative stuff on top that you like, where's the sofa? So That's our difference. But same thing. But what I'm to say is, with that, it starts off with the community, your neighbor, right? If I'm gonna be in my place, my neighbor has to know me, and I have to be a good example and an ambassador to my country. Because if they meet somebody and they go like, I met a Kenyan, they'll be like, hey, I have a Kenyan, my next door neighbor is a Kenyan. Man, he throws some awesome barbecue. They eat this food called nyama choma. And you know what? Food is always a great thing to bring people together. So when they have their barbecues, they tell the next door neighbor, come on over if there's a barbecue. He'll come in, yeah, he'll be like a deer in headlights, with the African music and everything. But once you invite him and tell him, look, here, I have this nyama choma and ugali. Guess what? When they meet the next Kenyan, what are they gonna say? Oh man, I have a neighbor who's from Kenya. He throws some meat. I don't know. They call it goat meat. They call it nyama choma. You can't say nyama choma. They say nyam chom, nyam chom, and ugali, some white stuff like hard stuff. But that's an experience that they've had. And, he's willing to share that with you. So you start off with that community, and then you get into a bigger setting where now, if this guy is invited and sees the African think tank, right? He's a business person. He sees the African big think tank, and it's a bigger version of my next door neighbor. He's able to take his ideas, business ideas, to that bigger group. And even before we get there, we have an African group here with it's called the Council of Africans in Kaufman County. That's soon to be a 501c. And if it gets to that level, then we are now bringing ourselves to the community and tell us, hey, look, we're Africans. This is how we are. This is how we behave. This is what we do. And that's one way of getting in. So when he comes in, he's like, hey, I met this Kenyan. We ate some some nyama choma. I'll meet a Nigerian like, no, we don't do nyama choma. We do something different. And I'll be like, oh, okay. What do you eat? See, that creates that conversation coming in. And remember, even Africa Day, the lady from Sudan told us the same thing: food, food, and food, and food. So think of it now, the community that is on the bigger scale. Then now you bring it to the African think tank, where now we're talking globally, where we extend ourselves to Africa. Maybe we have meet and greet, like take somebody to Africa. Last June, my sister-in-law and my sister-in-laws went to Africa and had their experience in Kenya, and it was an eye-opener. The things that they believed or we were talking to before about what they thought about Kenya is not what they went and saw. I'm hoping that for what they will have seen, they will be able to give out good vibes and entice other people to come back to Kenya. So back to you, Kola, when you said how we get around to this, these are the conversations we have. Take trips when you take a friend, if you can, take them to your country. Your neighbor, you're having a barbecue, tell your friend, hey, come eat some nyama choma, come eat something, So there are those things. They may not like the food, they may not like one or two things, but they'll find something that they will like, like the goose soup and that thing, the swallow. Okay, the swallow might be a problem, but but if they get round to it, and they get to know how to hold it and eat it, it's an experience. I have had that experience. So we can have this conversation. There's a lot. I even being a Kenyan have not had that experience with somebody else from Nigeria, from Ethiopia, from Congo. There are different tribes out there, so they have different cultural differences. So, like to say, Jen, there's a lot. You're just scraping off the surface.
Yeah, be open to even try the food. Maybe try authentic, international restaurant in your town that specializes in jollof rice, or something. Just be open.
One last question: who makes the best jollof rice, Cameroonians or Nigerians?
So I've never tried. I've never tried Cameroonian jollof rice, so I don't know the answer to that question. I know Nigerians like to say that their jollof rice is great. I'm also of Nigerian descent, but I will tell you also that I think that it's been my experience that sometimes Nigerians were willing to compromise on on the jollof rice making, right? There's no fixed recipe, right? Like if you're, sometimes there's this version of jollof rice. We call it concoction. Basically, what it means is that you didn't really have all the ingredients, but you put it together, slap it together. That's why it's called concoction. uh, so I guess it's pretty good. I'm not going to complain, right? I ate all of those as a kid and whatnot. But what I'm trying to get to is that I'm not one of those that would say Nigerian jollof rice is the best. The best jollof rice I've ever had, I think, was actually Ghanaian.
Oh yes, Ghanaians. I forgot. Yeah, it was either.
But I've never tried. I've never tried. I hear Sierra Leone has wonderful jollof rice, also, but I've never tried that one before. And now the Ghanaian one I had, that one they put a lot of attention to detail to it, so I really enjoyed that one.
Yeah.
A lot of the Nigerian ones were also very good. It's just that, like I said, you put it together. It's kind of like there's a difference between having a meal at home versus having a meal at a like, let's call it a 5-star restaurant or whatnot, right? There's a different level of care or intentionality that goes into it.
Mhm.
Not that the one at home is not delicious. My mom, my wife, my sisters, it's just that it is different. I would say that.
So I'm going to throw in this story. We are in New Orleans in a plantation, and this lady this host was walking us around, and she says, "Oh, these people, the slaves came and they carried spices, and they cook like a jollof rice from East Africa." And I was part of the crowd. I shouted. I said, "We don't eat jollof rice in East Africa." Everyone.
Why?
She was quiet, and she never said anything. She was like, "Oh yeah." I said, "We eat pilau." I told her, "We eat pilau, which is different." Then after that, once we went around, other people came and asked me, "Hey, what did you mean by jollof rice from East Africa? Where are you from?" Then I told them I'm from Kenya. So that was an interesting part of that tour.
Oh God, I should have got you started on the jollof. Oh, not the jollof rice.
Appreciate your indulging us in the jollof rice war.
Yeah.
So kind of talking about bridging the divide, 2 quick things. Number one, I would say is that, I think sometimes we need to think about as we create these communities or these councils, being intentional about bringing in the other voices. I'm terrible at this. I've not done my research and whatnot, but I would be interested in knowing if there are communities out there that are intentional about bringing in African Americans representation, African representation in one community, right? So, because like African think tank, I'm a little familiar with them. I'm not very familiar with them. I'm sure they're doing interesting work. I went to one of their events. I was really excited about it. But when you hear the name African think tank, it's possible that somebody who is African American may feel that's not for me, right? And that's not the case at all. So, being intentional of going to those African American spaces to say, hey, we want you to have a seat on the table because we are all one people, and we want to make sure that we're hearing different perspectives and doing that. That could be great. The other thing I would say really quickly is kind of talking about media. I think this is where I'm really excited about media, although I'm not sure I want to do the work. Is I see all these younger people or influencers doing all these things, and I think this is a wonderful opportunity for us to do some of these things. We talk about things like, for example, things like we get a group of African American influencers together, and we all go on vacation. Travel to different countries in Africa and connect with people, right? Just have conversations. Like media is now, in my view, now more accessible to every single person than it was before. It's no longer being controlled by these multinational companies that just have the airwaves. You have things like YouTube and whatnot. So what I would like to, some of the things that I always say when I'm financially independent, which I don't know when that's going to happen, but some of the things I would like to be able to do is to just do things like that. Get somebody who's from a part of Africa, get somebody who's from a part of the Caribbean, get somebody who's from the West,
I got
and
somebody.
do some of these TV shows and stuff like we talked about, and just do our own version of it, and just YouTube only. It's going to be lower cost compared to one of the things, but have that dialogue, have that perspective. There's a lot of opportunities that we can do.
You
Oh
should
my
meet
God.
Worldwide.
What
What
is
did
it?
you say?
This lady called Karina Worldwide. She was on my podcast way, way long ago, back in 2000. But I've been following her. She's been to Ghana, and that's how I did. That's how I met her from Clubhouse, and then we connected. And ever since then, we've been friends and follow each other. She lives in Mexico, but she's an African American originally from I think well, she's originally somewhere in the South, but I don't remember where, but she does a lot of content from Mexico, and she travels all around. I mean,
Travel.
right now she's in South America. She does a lot of travel in South America. She hasn't been to Africa yet, but she's even been to Tanzania. She's been to Tanzania. She's been to Ghana, and she also arranges these trips where she will take people from here and go hang out in Africa and have them view, just go for a safari. I think that's one of the beautiful things about her and her. I think she was starting an organization. I'll say organization, and it bridges the gap because one, it's not me as an African person sending you or a Kenyan person bringing you to Kenya. No, it's a visitor who has been there bringing you back to see the stuff out there. And I usually enjoy it when I see people who are not from Kenya actually coming to visit Kenya and posting their pictures out there. And yeah, I think we should do that. But I need to come visit your place, Kola, because I've not been to Nigeria, and there's a lot that you need to see in Nigeria. It's not one thing, but too many things. You have the north, south.
You're putting me on the spot, brother. You're putting me on the spot.
Always.
Like, so Nigeria is wonderful. I would say, unfortunately, there's some challenges right now, right? Security related challenges. I'm sure it's safe to visit, but I usually just recommend that people at this time just visit Ghana. Ghana, I think, is wonderful. You don't have the security challenges for now, and hopefully, when things are a little bit better from a security standpoint, would be a good time to visit Nigeria. And I know some Nigerians would disagree with that perspective, but that is my perspective, right? And I'll tell you what I would tell my siblings. So.
All right.
So yeah, we'll do that Nigeria trip. We just have to wait a little bit till things become better from a security standpoint.
What's this guy in Houston? What's his name? You had him on your show. I forgot his name. He's on Instagram and he has this voice. He always talks about.
No, I don't know who you're talking about.
No, you know him. You know him. You had him on your show, on your first show. The one that you're talking about, you're bridging Africans. I keep forgetting his name.
Brother Uche.
Uche. Uche has a video and he said, people are looking at security and they're like talking about security is bad in Nigeria. Nigeria is bad right now. But let me tell you, people are coming to party here in Nigeria in December. It's the dirty December in Nigeria. And people are talking about bad things happening in Nigeria. People have no idea what's happening on the other side because it's one side of the country, whereas the other side is happening. Things are happening. Just like Congo. Congo is it's like the US. It has 3 different time zones. So what happens in the Kivu area has nothing to do with what's happening on the other side. And people don't realize that. They think the whole of Congo is bad. But hey, it is what it is. Don't believe what you say. Google is your best friend. Look around. If you can't find it, use Twitter. If you can't find it, and Black Twitter. If you can't find it, hey, just go ahead and
go
Black
Twitter.
You got that one. You got.
Wait, I didn't know Elon had Black Twitter. What's going on here?
Black Twitter.
I didn't know this. You need to tell me. I always knew that my South African brother was going to represent.
There was this Black Twitter.
Okay. So I think to kind of address what you were talking about regarding Nigeria. So yes, you are correct. The challenge I see, this is my perception, is this. It is not that everywhere is quote unquote unsafe. That's not the case.
Mm-hmm.
My concern is that, and I'll use an analogy to kind of put, pass this message across. If something happens in the US, right, there are multiple cities in the US that we know of where we would say there are more crime than others.
Mm-hmm.
But we have some, let's just call it fate, that the justice system would attempt to do some things, investigate. Sometimes it's not successful, but a lot of times it is successful. They find somebody, they prosecute, they go through the system, and whatever happens. My concern with Nigeria is that I'm not so sure that happens, right? Right. So I would say, I've not looked at the statistics about crime collectively in the US compared to like Nigeria from a percentage standpoint. It's probably about the same. But I would say in the US, I have more faith that there's soon going to be some justice system that tries to do the best thing or what they think is right. And I would say that, in my opinion, because of the corruption, because of other priorities, I don't know that same level of intentionality is in the justice system in Nigeria, right? So what I would recommend to my friends is, if you wanted to visit Nigeria, I would say pause at this time. Why don't you visit Ghana? The other thing too is, like, if you're going to go to, if you're going to travel, let us say, I think a trip to Nigeria is about 12 to 14 hours, depending on where you're flying out from. You don't want to be limited to just seeing a part of the country, right? You want to be able to go to different parts of the country and see it. And I had the opportunity to visit Ghana, I think about 2 years ago, right? And when I travel, I take public transportation, right? I'm like, right? I'm like sweating, but I'm taking public transportation. And Ghana, I went to different parts of the country. It felt very, very safe. Didn't have to worry about corruption, didn't have to worry about security. I'm sure they have their own challenges as well, right? That I may not necessarily be aware of. But to me, it just was a better experience than I would say than Nigeria at this time.
Okay. That's good. And it's important to be mindful of these things, so I appreciate you sharing that. Yeah.
All right.
Sure.
So I'm going to pass it on to you guys. Action item. When are we planning this? We have to come up with a name, but when are we planning this African creator strip where we go to different parts and start creating content and interacting with people? You guys need to think of the name and stuff and let me know. I come up with the ideas. You guys have to do the work.
And I'm excited about the African happy hour. Like, yeah, let's get that going.
Start with the African happy hour.
Yeah.
We need to figure that out, and then now see who can get the buy-in from there. And I think that's one way of getting in. If you can get somebody to
See?
You guys are putting the work on me.
I mean, if
we round them up
an hour, and then then you get to know who's going to be on the buy-in. Once you get into people who have a buy-in and have a say and can be able to travel, then you're like, okay, fine, here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people can go.
I like that. I like that.
Let me just use this as an opportunity to invite you guys to the next recording of African Happy Hour. So we're going to be talking about African leaders and age. The name is the name of the title of the podcast. I have to modify a little bit about, but we're kind of exploring the relationship between the age of the African leaders. When I mean African leaders, I mean African head of states, and how long they've been in power or tenure in office compared to the other continents around the world. So you are both welcome to that. I will let you guys know the details. And if you want to come have a conversation, you don't necessarily have to have a personal experience with them. We're just exploring the topic and seeing what's going on there. So it will be good to hear different perspectives about that topic.
He's talking about the Cameroonian president.
Not just him,
But no, I mean, you can speak to that, Sambaza. You were a natural activist fighting for your rights in Kenya.
No. Our Kenyan presidents have 2 terms. Once your 2 terms are over, you get out. You don't.
I know, but you still,
we had one
your voice heard.
We had one for 25 years, but now there's one beer. He's been there, I think, in 97. Yeah, but
true.
Yeah. And with all that now, because Kola, I know we have so much we can talk about. We can extrapolate so many things with you. Seeing that, when I sit with you, there's no end to these stories. Once you bring Jen as the third wheel here, and don't take the third wheel as a bad thing. It's the one that makes everything settle. A pot cannot be used properly with two stones. It's either the third stone. So you make up the third stone, and therefore you become an important part to the conversation. And adding you in makes it even more interesting that we'll have too much to talk about. So maybe we can continue this another time, right?
For sure. And we appreciate you so much, Kola. You've been such a great guest. For sure. I definitely want to let you have an opportunity to share something else. So we appreciate the conversation. It's been so awesome. And if you guys have enjoyed the conversation, we invite you to share it with friends, family. Our collective awareness and advocacy play a crucial role. We will have the links for Kola's podcast that he hosts and curates. And so we want you to share that out as well. So please, when the audio version is posted, the links will be there for Kola's broadcast. And our collective awareness and advocacy play a crucial role in creating positive change. We invite you to stay tuned for more engaging content, and we look forward to continuing these important conversations in the future. Kola, please stay with us for our proper goodbye, but everyone else, until next time, take care. At this time, we're going to go ahead and conclude the episode. We greatly appreciate you listening. We invite you to follow us on social media. On Instagram, it is Woke by Accident Podcast. On Twitter, it is Woke by. On Facebook, it is Woke by Accident Podcast. We also have the new website up, www.wokebyaccident.net. Please check us out, and also follow us on all of your favorite streaming platforms, and please leave a review and share feedback. You can also reach out by Gmail, wokebyaccident@gmail.com. And every time you listen, we appreciate it so much. Thank you for listening, and take care.